A scandal that's torched PwC and bruised its rivals, embarrassing a government that's spending billions of dollars a year with consulting firms.
Incredibly unprofessional practices that have been replete across this sector.
How does a government come back from a scandal that makes it look as if it's absolutely and utterly weak?
By getting out a bigger stick.
The federal government has launched a crackdown on tax advisor misconduct.
Penalties for people and firms that promote tax avoidance schemes will increase 100-fold, from $7.8 million to $780 million. The government is also proposing extending the time the tax office has to bring cases to 6 years. And tax secrecy barriers that stop the tax office talking to other regulators will be removed.
As a deterrence measure, it's the nuclear option. It's there to scare people and to make sure people in firms know that there's a cost to stuffing around.
And coming, a broad review of how the firms are governed.
The secret is to have proper tendering processes, to have very clear lines of authority, to make sure that all issues are resolved before you contract and you don't automatically extend or renew, that in fact you have to do that every time.
The scandal began when former PwC senior partner, Peter John Collins, took information from confidential Treasury briefings about plans to tax multinational corporations. PwC used that information to help their global clients get around the new laws, making millions in fees. A key rule of business: don't make your biggest client angry. The federal government is now rewriting the rules of how the powerful firms are scrutinised and governed. In the past, the industry has successfully pushed back on legislation. Let the consultation begin.
Daniel Ziffer there. It's a start, is how Professor Brendan Lyon describes the government's proposed crackdown. Formerly a partner at KPMG, now at the University of Wollongong, he sat down with me earlier.
They really deal only with the role of tax advisors under the relevant legislation, and they don't deal with the broader issue that I've raised and others have raised, which is really that these partnerships, by structuring themselves as partnerships, avoid corporate tax, they avoid payroll tax, they avoid the basic disclosure that really creates all of their audit business. And as a result, we have a large segment of the economy providing advice to corporations, audits to corporations and to government who are not regulated, and very clearly where the standards are not being enforced.
The maximum penalty of $780 million is a very big stick for bad actors. Is that how you believe the consulting firms will look at this penalty, and what does it say about the larger nature of the sector right now?
It's a really big stick, and it's a very big step in terms of the tax advice provided by accounting firms. But again, it doesn't cover the spectrum of other things that they do. In that instance, they remain, or in that respect, they remain legally protected because of the professional scheme for the accounting profession. That caps the liabilities that they can get for their consulting work, for their other non-audit, non-tax work, and caps their audit work as well, with a maximum of $75 million for the largest occurrences. But the reality is they face protections that corporations don't get, and they don't have any transparency measures on them whatsoever. So again, the incentives are not there. They're not exposed to the full value of the company like the rest of us are. They're capped, they're protected, and as a result, we're seeing the sorts of integrity issues that we've seen.
The government says regulators will have more teeth under these reforms. Will they be further emboldened to go after wrongdoing?
Look, I guess the most important part of the government's announcement was probably the smallest, but that was where it referred to its intent to tackle this issue of partnerships falling beyond the law and operating in a grey area. That will require cooperation, as the government's rightly said, with the states and territories, but let's be honest, it's in nobody's interest to have an accounting profession that's not accountable to its core purpose, and where it's not accountable to tax taxpayers for the consulting work that it undertakes. So I actually see this as being a great opportunity for states and Commonwealth to come together, because it's very clear that there's been a protected business model with a lot of people earning a lot of money, but without the accountabilities or the adherence to the public good that you would expect in return for those protections.
The government has signalled that this is an area it's going to look at over the next 2 years or so. Are there specific reforms you would like to see implemented, and do you think a Royal Commission is warranted?
Look, I think a Royal Commission into the quality of the auditing side of the Big Four and other major accounting firms is warranted. It's pretty clear that we're heading into choppy economic waters. And, you know, it was Warren Buffett who said it well, it's only when the tide goes out that you can see who's been swimming naked. And I think that is a position that Australia doesn't want to be in terms of the audits of the large firms that hold our superannuation savings and everything else. So I think that would be a logical and smart thing to do. I think there is a power of work to be done. The Senate's doing a good work of it at the moment, but it needs to have a process and a life that follows on from that. And that is really about ending this protection, this protected racket, where a number of firms are given a preferential legal protection, a preferential tax structure, and where they're not held to any transparency or accountability measures whatsoever. It's not in the national interest the way it is, and it's good to see that the government has flagged its intent to look at it.
Do you expect the consulting sector will lobby against some of these proposed reforms? Could they be watered down?
Look, very obviously so. It's not in their interest when they've been doing so well out of a protected structure and sort of tax advantaged protected structures and the like. It's not in their interest to see the change, and these are very large, very powerful actors. We've already seen the self-regulator issue press releases talking against the need for any review, any change, anything else. The reality is that next year the current professional scheme expires. That's up for review right now, and I hope that the Professional Services Council that regulates that and sets the terms and conditions is watching very closely what's happened and what hasn't happened in terms of industry self-regulation.
Brendan Lyon, thank you.
Great to be with you.